Hi everybody, my name is Stanley and I want to welcome you to Spiel mit Stan. Today I will be showing you a prototype of a very new game, which is Fields of Arle, or also known as Arle Erde. As always, I won't be teaching you the strategy, but the basic gameplay, so you know how it works and how it plays. Well, what exactly is Fields of Arle? Well, in Fields of Arle, you will be thematically a designer of a village, more or less, and you will be building a small village in East Frisia. And mechanically, this is done by worker placement. The game plays 1 to 2 players, and it will be released this year at the Spiel 2014 in Essen. The game is designed by Uwe Rosenberg, and it will be published in the States by Z-Man Games. As I said, I will be showing you a prototype of this game since it's not finished yet, but it will be in a few weeks, so you can pick up this game at Essen if you want. The game is somewhat language dependent, but many things are done with icons, so I will try to translate as good as possible, but I don't think you should have any issues following the gameplay with that. Well, what is the goal of the game? Well, as I basically said, you will be expanding and building a village, and with that you will be building new buildings, new stables, you will be trying to get animals. You also will try to expand your building space by building dikes, since Arle is near the sea, and so you have to build dikes to expand your land. And also you will be draining more, and with that getting more space to build on. You will also traveling and selling goods to different cities in the vicinity, so you get more food out of that, and of course victory points. And since the game is divided into different halves, you have the summer and the winter phases, you will have to prepare yourself for the winter in the summer, and for the summer in for the winter, of course. I will be showing you the game with introductory buildings as recommended for the first game of Fields of Arle, as suggested by the rulebook. So let's begin, and as always, have fun watching.
I have now set up a full game of Fields of Arle according to the beginner's rules. Now let's first take a look at the components. In the center we find the main game board with the different buildings and actions that we are able to take. We also find the player order and the current half year, also known as round. At the top we find the supply board. There we find the different things like fields and stables and plows and carriages, and also of course the different clothes. On the top left we find the different animals. There are sheep, cows, and of course horses, and also we have there the peat. On the right we have the different building materials like clay, bricks, wood and timber. The player with the lighthouse is the starting player. In this case it's the red player. This is also symbolized by the order on the main board. The player that is on top is the starting player, and in this case it's the red player. Now both players have the same setup regarding their home and storage boards, so let's have a look at the home board of the red player. The red player starts with 3 more fields. One is already dehydrated and has 4 peat on top. Then he has a flax field and a grain field. He has 1 stall with a horse and 5 dikes. 3 of those dikes already form a continuous line, and 2 of them not a completely continuous line like that. Each player starts with a supply of 5 food, 4 wool, 3 flax, 2 hides, 1 grain and another food marker that is set to 0. Also, each player starts with a total of 3 peat, 4 clay and 4 wood. Each player also starts with a personal storage board that has the travel destinations on top, where we can sell different goods into food, and a small barn where the carriages and different peat boats and stuff like that can be stored. Also to say to the setup of the game, at the top we find the 4 buildings that are set by the beginner's rules. Usually we choose 4 random buildings out of 7 and put them there, but the beginner's rules say that we have to put those 4 up there. The same is for the orange buildings, you choose 2 out of 5, and the same counts for the blue buildings, you choose 3 out of 6. With that, the replayability of the game is increased, since you have always different buildings in the game. The buildings in the middle are always the same each game, and the same counts for the buildings down here. The game is played in 9 rounds, which are divided into summer and into winter. First we play a round of summer, then we play a round of winter, then again the summer and winter, and so on and so on. At the start of each round, in June and in December, you set up the workers, whoever is the starting player. Then you have time from July to October and from January to April to do your actions. And in November and in May there is some inventorying phase. The basic principle is a worker placement mechanic, and each player chooses 1 worker and does 1 action from the game board, and after that it's the next player's turn. Although in the summer you're only able to do summer actions, and in the winter you're only able to do winter actions. That means you can't do only winter actions in the summer and you can't do only summer actions in the winter. But 1 player can go and do actions from the other side of the field. So the red player could do a winter action in the summer round, and that would mean that the yellow player would be the starting player next turn, and the red player can choose freely of any actions, so it is not restricted to any specific action. But you have to know that only 1 player can do 1 action from the other side of the field. So if 1 player chooses 1 action from the field, the other player is restricted to do actions from the current half year. Now, after each player has chosen all their actions, we have an inventorying in November, and in the inventorying multiple things happen. First, all the carriages will be unloaded. Then you get food depending on how many cows and sheep you have. Then all the fields give the appropriate goods, and afterwards you have to pay 3 food and 2 peat. And if you are not able to pay the food or the peat, you have to substitute with grain or animals for the food and wood for the peat. And if you're not able to do this, you have to pay 2 victory points for each thing that you were not able to pay. There's also an inventory phase after the winter. There, the first thing that happens is also the carriages are getting unloaded. Then the animals reproduce, but more on that later. And then you get wool, depending on how many sheep you have. And afterwards you have to pay only 3 food, but no peat, since you don't have to heat your home in the summer. There's one thing I want to say. All the fields that have such an Austrasian pattern on them are fields that you have to pay the cost for to use those. I won't be telling you anymore about the different actions. I will be showing you as we go and explaining them as we are playing. The same for the buildings. And basically this is everything I can say about the game and the different rules. So let's start with the first round and the summer. Now let's start with the red player. The red player wants to do as the first action the master. Now he can, for each workbench that he has, and he has 2 of them, he can increase the availability of tools that he has. So he upgrades them, and the first thing that he wants to upgrade is the workbenches themselves. This costs 2 clay. Now he has 3 workbenches and he can utilize this immediately, so he still has 2 tools that he can improve, and he improves the shovels by 1 and also the axes by 1. this costs him now 2 clay and 2 wood that he pays. The yellow player wants to build a building, so he uses a carpenter. Now he can build a building or 1 stall, and the stall costs 2 clay and 1 grain, but he wants to build a building. And he decides that he wants to build the plow maker's workshop. Oh, this is a building from the beginner's setup, and now he can plow 1 field prior to every November, and he puts that building down there, and he has to pay 1 building material and 1 grain. He decides to pay 1 grain and 1 wood for that. And now it's the red player's turn. He decides that he wants to do the woodcutter action. Now he gets 1 wood per axe that he has, and he has 4 of them, so he receives a total of 4 wood. The yellow player decides he wants to do an action from the winter, and with that the red player stays the starting player for the next turn. And now he chose the dike warden, and now he can flip 1 tile from his board that has such an icon, and he decides he wants to drain this more, and now he receives 4 peat on that he is able to cut later. And he also receives 1 dike movement, and that means he can move 1 dike. So he decides that he wants to move this dike up here, and now he has 3 additional fields that he can use to build on. Because this is thematically because on top of that is the ocean, and only things below the dike line are able to build on, which makes sense thematically. Now the red player also wants to build a building, and he decides that he wants to have the workshop. With this workshop he is now able, prior to every November, to receive 1 wood and also to improve 1 of his tools. So basically he can build 1 tool. He places the building down here and also has to pay 1 grain, and he decides to spend 1 wood for that. The yellow player decides he wants to do the forester action. Now he first has to pay 1 food for that, and he is now able to build either a building or a forest, and he has no materials left to build any building that is available on the board because he spent it already to build another building. So he decides that he wants to take a forest. So he basically takes this forest and puts it on his game board. Now it's the red player's turn, and he wants to take the colonist action. Now he receives a horse and can dehydrate a moor. So first he receives a whore and puts it in his stall, and now he can also dehydrate this moor. So he flips it over and puts 4 peat on top of that. Now, to the animal keeping rules, you can keep 1 animal on each dike, 2 animals of the same kind on each field where you can build on, and regarding the stables and stuff, you can keep as many animals on as is depicted on the stable itself. Yellow player now decides that he wants to do the grocer action, and now he can choose 1 animal of his kind, 1 wheat and 1 leather, and he decides he wants to have 1 cow, and he puts it over there. Then he also receives 1 grain, which is probably not as well visible in the bright light, and he also receives 1 leather. With that, the summer is over and we go into the November inventory, but first all the buildings are activated. Now the yellow player plows 1 field, and he decides that he wants to have a flex field, and so he takes 1 and puts it over there. This is a free action since he has that building. The red player gains 1 wood, but he wants to use it immediately to increase 1 of his tools, so he takes the wood and increases the space by 1. Now the summer is definitely over and we go into the November inventory. First, all the carriages are emptied, but nobody has any carriages. The only player with a cow is the yellow player, and for 1 cow you receive a total of 1 food, so he gets 1 food. Now each player receives the appropriate goods regarding their fields. The red player receives a total of 1 grain and 1 flax for his 2 fields, so 1 grain and 1 flax, and the yellow player receives 2 flax, 1 grain, and also receives 1 wood because he has a forest. Now both players have to feed, so the red player pays 3 food and the yellow player also pays 3 food, and both have to pay 2 peat, and with that the inventory is over and we go into the next round. The red player is still the starting player and we have our first winter round. The red player does the rainwright action and now he can build a vehicle and or a peat boat, and he decides he wants to build only a vehicle for now, and so he takes this carriage that costs him 5 wood and 1 horse, and he puts this in his barn, so he pays 1 horse and all of his wood. The yellow player decides that he wants to do the master action, and now first he increases the workbenches by 1, then he increases the shovels by 1 and the weaving looms also by 1. Now he has to pay a total of 3 wood and 2 clay, which he does. The red player decides he wants to do a summer action and he chooses the woodcutter, and now the yellow player will be the starting player for the next round, and now he receives a total of 4 wood. The yellow player decides that he wants to do the linen weaver action, and now for each weaving loom that he has he can convert 1 flax into 1 linen, and he has 3 weaving looms, so he converts a total of 3 flax into 3 linen, and now he receives the 3 linen for that. The red player decides that he wants to do the baker action, and he can convert 1 grain and 1 peat per oven that he has into 6 food, so he pays 1 peat and 1 grain and receives a total of 6 food, so he's now at 8. The yellow player wants to do the potter action, and here he can convert 1 clay into 3 food and 1 peat each for each pottery wheel that he has. He has 2 wheels, so he converts 2 clay into a total of 6 food and 2 peat, so he gets 2 peat and 6 food. The red player decides he wants to do the grocer action, so now first he can cut 1 peat, so he takes the peat, and now he can get an animal of his choice. He decides that he wants to have another horse, and he also gets 1 wood and 1 clay, which he receives. The yellow player decides that he wants to do the cattle trader action. Now he gets 2 grain and he gets also 1 sheep, and he can choose whether he wants to get a cow or a horse, and he wants to have another cow, so he takes the cow and puts it there. Now he wants to change the horses with the cow because animals can be moved around on your home board as you like, and he just puts it now like that. With that, the first winter is over and we come into the May inventory, but first the red player wants to convert some goods. So how does this work? He has a carriage over there and you can load it up with different things. You can do this at any time, any round. And with that you just take the goods that you want and you flip them over and load them into the carriage. So you take the wood, flip it over, now you have timber, and you put it on the carriage. But you don't get this until the end of the round. And he wants to convert 1 clay into a brick, so he flips that over and puts it there, and he has to pay 1 peat. Now we come into the inventory phase, and the first thing that happens is the red player gets all of his goods, and now he can use it in the next round. And then the animal breeding phase comes. Each animal pair in a stall breeds a pup. So the red player receives another horse in his stall, and the yellow player receives another cow. Now we get to the wool phase basically, and the red player has no sheep, so he doesn't get any wool, but the yellow player gets one wool because he has one sheep. Now both players have to pay 3 food. The red player pays this, so does the yellow player. No issues here. And we come into the next round, and the yellow player is the starting player, and we come into the next summer phase. The yellow player decides he wants to do the clay worker, and now he gets 1 clay per shovel that he has, and he has a total of 4 shovels, so he gets a total of 4 clay. The red player decides he wants to do the peat cutter, and since he has 5 spades, he can now cut 5 peat total. So he removes this repeat from this one moor tile and 2 peat from the other moor tile, and with that this moor tile is empty and it now gets removed from the game. Now the yellow player chooses the dike builder, and now he gets a sheep, and this is because he can choose between a cow and a sheep, and per pair of shovels that he gets 1 dike move, and he has 4 shovels, so he has 2 pairs, and so he moves 2 dikes, and he moves the dikes like this. The red player takes the farmer action, and now he can build 1 plow. The plows are on the backsides of the peat boats, and 1 plow costs 1 wood and a cow or a horse. And he puts the plow into his barn, and he pays 1 wood, and he also pays 1 horse. And now he can plow 1 field per plow that he has, and he chooses to plow another grain field like this. The yellow player takes another master action, so now he first improves the spades by 1, and he has to pay 1 wood, and he wants to improve the workbenches by 1, and he pays 2 clay for that. The red player decides that he wants to take the grocer action. Now he can choose between timber, brick, or an animal of his choice, and he wants to get a cow, and he puts it like this. He also gets 1 grain, and lastly he gets 1 ladder for that, so he takes that and puts it. Since you can load up your carriage at any point with travel destinations or items, he wants to go to Aurich, and there he wants to sell 1 ladder and 1 horse for a total of 9 food, and you get that food immediately and have to pay everything immediately, so he puts that in his cart, and now he has to pay the horse, so he gives away 1 horse and he gives away the ladder, and for that he gets 9 food and is up to 14. And he also wants to convert 1 clay into a brick and pays 1 peat for that. Now the yellow player wants to take an action from the winter, and he wants to take the dike warden, since he has to give away the starting player at the next round anyway. So now he wants to dehydrate another more, so he flips that over and receives 4 peat on top of that. And he also gets 1 dike move and moves this dike, so he receives another 3 fields where he can build on. The red player decides that he wants to use the colonist again, and now he first receives a horse, and now he can flip this more and dehydrate it, and he receives 4 peat on top of that. Now everyone has chosen every action, and we are shortly before November again, and everyone gets his bonuses from the buildings. So the red player just receives 1 wood, and the yellow player can plow another acre, and the yellow player decides that he wants to plow another flax acre, and he puts it like this. The red player decides that he doesn't want to upgrade any of his tools, since he wants to spend the wood on something else. Now we come into the November inventory, and first all the carriages are emptied, so the red player receives his brick, and now he has a travel destination. It gets flipped over and put on the left side of his home board. You maybe can't see it properly, but the more travel destinations you visit, the more points you get in the end. So you maybe see it better with the yellow board. You can get up to 10 points for traveling if you visit all destinations. Now the players get food according to how many sheep and cows they have. The yellow player has 2 sheep and 3 cows, so he gets 3 food, 2 for the cows and 1 for the sheep. So now the video crashed for me, sadly, and I didn't notice it until I was already at least 2 turns into the next round. So believe me and let us continue with the next round. The red player uses the dike warden, and now he wants to dehydrate this more and wants to move this dike, and now he also receives 4 peat on top of this dehydrated more. The yellow player decides to use the wood trader. Now he has to pay 1 food, but I already paid this when I had to rewind from the start of the round. In any case, he gets now 4 wood, and if you wonder why he has now 5, it's because of his forest. The red player chooses the baker action, and now he pays 1 grain and 1 peat to receive a total of 6 food. So he pays the peat and receives 3 plus 3, a total of 6 food, and he wants also to convert 1 wood into timber and 1 clay into a brick, and pays with his last peat for that. But he won't get the resources until the next round. The yellow player chooses the wainwright, and now he can finally build a carriage, and he decides to get that carriage for a total of 5 wood and 1 horse. So he pays 1 horse and also the 5 wood. He can't afford to buy a peat boat because he doesn't have enough wood left. He also now converts this leather into leatherware and puts it on his carriage. The red player knows he won't be starting player next round anymore, so he uses a summer action. So yellow is starting player now, and he uses the peat cutter, and now he can cut peat, a total of 5. So he cuts 4 from there and 1 from there, and with that this more is gone. The yellow player uses the carpenter and wants to build a stall. It costs him 2 clay and 1 grain, so he pays the clay and also 1 grain. So he now gets another stall. He puts it on this field and also puts the sheep inside it. The red player uses the tanner action, and now he gets for his 2 hides a total of 2 leather. The yellow player goes to the cattle trader, so he gets 2 grain, and now he gets also a sheep and puts the sheep on this dike, and moves also the cow onto this free field, and gets another cow, which he also puts on the same field. With that, this winter is over, and first all the carriage is getting emptied. So the red player gets his brick and his timber, and the yellow player gets his leather cloth. Now the animals breed. The red player receives another horse, and the yellow player receives another sheep and another cow. Now we come into the shearing phase basically, and the yellow player receives 2 wool for his 4 sheep, and both have to pay 3 food. And with that the winter is over and we come into the summer, and the yellow player is the starting player. The yellow player uses the peat cutter action, and now he cuts a total of 5 peat, so this 4 peat is removed and also 1 from there. Now he has 2 more fields to build on. The red player wants to build another building, and now he has enough materials to build one of the big buildings, and he decides he wants to build the Arle church. It costs him a total of 3 timber, 3 bricks, and also 15 food. So he pays all of this, but now he gets a carriage and puts it in his barn. Now this carriage is a little bit special. It only has 2 fields, and on the right field you only can put items that are at least 2 fields wide, so you can't put this on there. That's illegal. The yellow player chooses the clay worker, and now he receives a total of 4 clay. The red player wants to use the fisherman action. Now the first thing that happens is he gets 1 sheep, and now he increases his fish traps by 1, and now he gets 1 food per fish trap that he has, and he has 3, so he gets a total of 3 food. The yellow player chooses the woodcutter action, so he gets now a total of 3 wood. So wants to convert one of the wood into timber, so he loads it onto his cart. The red player decides that he wants to do the farmer action again, so he builds another plow for 1 wood and 1 horse. And now he can plow 2 acres or fields, and he decides to plow 2 grain fields and puts them like this. The yellow player decides to use an action from the winter, so now he uses the Wainwright and he wants to build a peat boat. Of course, also the red player is now the starting player, and the peat boat costs 1 wood, and he can convert 1 peat into different goods, into food, wool, flax, grain and hides. So he pays the wood. The red player wants to convert this wood into timber, and for his last action the red player decides that he wants to use the dike builder, so he now gets 1 cow, and of course he also gets the 2 dike actions that are with his 4 shovels. So he moves this dike up here, and he moves this dike also up here. Now the red player gains 1 wood for his building, and the yellow player can plow another field, and he decides to plow another flax field up here. And now all can load up their carriages, and the yellow player decides that he wants to load up a linen to make it into summer clothing, and the red player decides he wants to put up the leather to make it into leather clothing. As I said, you can do this action at every point at the game, but it sometimes makes sense to make it in the last possible moment. Now we come into the November inventory, and all the cards are getting unloaded. So everyone gets their materials back. Now both players receive food depending on how many sheep and cows they have. The yellow player gets a total of 4 food. Since he has 5 cows and 4 sheep, he gets 3 food for the cows and 1 for the sheep. And the red player gets 1 food for the cows. And since he has a total of 4 grain fields, he gets 4 grain and also 1 flax. And the yellow player receives a total of 4 flax and 1 grain. Also, the yellow player gets another wood for his forest. And now both players have to pay 3 food and also 2 peat, and both pay this without any issues. Now we come into the next winter, and the red player is the starting player. Now the red player wants to take the baker action, so he converts 1 grain and also 1 peat and to a total of 6 food. The yellow player wants to take an action from the summer, and he wants to build a building, and he wants to build a mill. Now he gets for his 5 fields once the 10 food, and he has to pay 1 timber and either 8 flax or 8 grain, and he pays with a total of 7 grain, and he converts 1 peat into 1 grain and pays with that. Basically he can do that with his speedboat, and now he receives a total of 10 food. The red player now first wants to go to Emden, and there he wants to sell a leather cloth and a peat for a total of 10 food. So he puts it on this cart, puts one of his leather clothes back and also 1 peat. This is action he can do always, and now he gets 10 food total. And now he chooses the action laborer, and with the laborer he can either build a building or repeat any action that was already chosen, and he wants to build a building. Now he wants to build the junk dealers in, and now he either gets 1 handcart or a peat boat and 1 leather clothing and a woolen. It costs him 2 different materials and a total of 9 food. So he pays the food and the materials, and he decides that he wants to get a peat boat for that. So he takes a peat boat, puts it in his barn, and now he also gets 1 leather clothing and 1 woolen, which I accidentally gave him woolen cloth. The yellow player goes to the builder's merchant. Now he takes 2 hides, and now he can take 1 wood or 1 clay, and he decides that he wants to have 1 wood, and now he gets 1 timber or 1 brick, and he decides that he wants to have 1 brick. The red player shouldn't have received the woolen clothing from beginning, but only the woolen. I forgot that somehow. The red player now goes to the grocer, and now he can take 1 peat off and removes the moor tile, and also he gets 1 animal of his choice, and he decides that he wants to get another sheep. And now he also gets 1 wood and 1 clay, and he decides that he wants to convert this clay into a brick and pays 1 peat for that. The yellow player decides he wants to go to the linen weaver, and he has 3 looms, and he can convert now 3 flax into 3 linen, which he now does. He pays 3 flax, and now he receives 3 linen. The red player wants to go to Esens and sell 2 grain for 4 food and 1 woolen for 4 food. So he puts it in his carriage and puts the woolen away and also 2 grain, and now he receives 8 food, so he's at 14 now. And as his action he decides he used the dike warden. Now he first moves his dike, and then he can flip 1 of his carriages over, and he decides to do this with that, and now it's worth more points, and also has 1 field more where he can put stuff on. Now the yellow player goes to the butcher, and now per slaughtering table he can convert animals to food, and he has 2 slaughtering tables, so he can convert 2 animals, and he decides he wants to convert 1 sheep and 1 cow, and now he gets 3 food per animal and 1 food more for each cow, so he gets 7 food total, and he also gets 2 hides per animal, so he gets a total of 4 hides. Now let's just give him the food and the hides. He also decides that he wants to convert all of his wood into timber, so he puts everything on his card. And with that the round is over and all the cards are getting emptied. Now the red player gets his travel destinations put on the left side of his board, and he also receives the brick that was on his cards, and the yellow player receives all of his timber. And now we come into the animal breeding phase. The red player first switches the cows and the horses around, and now he receives another cow, and the yellow player receives another sheep and another cow. Now the players receive the wool. The yellow player receives 2 wool for his 4 sheep, and the red player receives 1 wool for his sheep. Now both players have to pay 3 food, which they both do. And we come into the next summer phase with the red player as the starting player. The red player now wants to use the woolen weaver, and he now can convert 1 wool into woolen per weaving loom that he has. He has 2 looms, so he gets 2 woolen and converts 2 wool into that. The yellow player decides he wants to cut peat, so he now cuts 5 peat, removes the 4 from here. With that the moor is removed and gets another peat from here. Now the red player first wants to craft this woolen into winter wear, so he puts it onto his carriage, and he uses the labor action and has to pay 2 food and repeats the peat cutting action from the yellow player. Actually, I forgot to pay the food. Now the yellow player uses the colonist action, so he gets another horse and he flips his moor, so it's dehydrated again, and he puts the peat on top of that. The red player decides that he wants to use the dike warden again, so he moves 1 dike and also flips 1 of his carriages, so again it's now worth more points and it's a bigger. Now the yellow player wants to convert 2 clay into bricks and pays 2 peat for that, and he wants to use the forester action, so he now gets another forest and he has to pay 1 food for that. He actually decides that it's the best to convert all the bricks, clay into bricks, and pays another peat. The red player decides that he wants to do the woodcutter and gets 4 wood, and he converts 2 wood into timber on his carriage. The yellow player decides that he wants to use a builder and build a building. He decides that he wants to build the golf house in, and he places it down there. He has to pay 9 food for that, and also 2 different building materials, and he pays 1 clay and 1 timber. And now he gets 1 timber per stall that he has, and he has 2 stalls, so he gets again 2 timber for that. Now the special buildings activate again, and the red player receives 1 wood, and he uses the wood to increase his spades by 1. So he increases the spades by 1, and he now pays the wood. The yellow player decides that he doesn't want to plow another field right now, and we come into the November inventory. The red player receives 3 food. He receives 1 for his sheep and 2 for his cows, and the yellow player receives 4 food. He receives 3 food for the cows and 1 food for the sheep. Now since the red player took an action from the winter field, the yellow player will be starting player next round. Forgot to do that. And now all the fields produce, so the yellow player receives a total of 4 flax and 1 grain. So he gets another grain, and he also gets 2 wood for his 2 forests. The red player receives a total of 4 grain and 1 flax. Now both players have to pay the food, so both players pay the 3 food and the 2 peat. And with that we come into the last winter, and the yellow player is the starting player. Oh yeah, and actually I forgot to empty the carriage, so let's do this really quick. Everyone gets all the materials from their carriages. Yellow player gets his wool cloth and his timber. Now the yellow player takes the grocer action. He first cuts 1 peat, and now he gets an animal of his choice. He decides that he wants to have another horse, and he now switches the animals a little bit around so it better fits into his stables. And he also gets 1 wood and 1 clay, but I accidentally gave him a brick. The red player decides that he wants to build a building, so he takes a summer action, and now he wants to build the textile house. It costs him a total of 1 brick and 2 different pieces of clothing. So he pays with 2 pieces of clothing and 1 brick and put it over there, and now he gets 1 woolen, 1 leather and 1 linen. The yellow player wants to do the labor, so he wants to build a building, so he has to pay 2 food for that. And first he wants to go to Leer, and there he wants to sell a cow and a linen and a flax for a total of 10, and another clothing for a total of 16 food. So he puts this on his carriage and pays 1 flax, 1 linen, 1 cow and 1 piece of clothing, and he decides to put the summer clothing away, and he gets now 15 food. And now he wants to build the Behrung castle, which costs him 3 timber, 3 bricks and 15 food. He puts the castle over there, and now has to pay 15 food, 3 timber and 3 bricks. Now he improves his ovens and weaving looms by 1. What I just noticed, this placement over here is illegal. I should have moved the other dike on top of that, but basically it's still okay, because it would be possible to do this move in any case. Now the red player goes to the builder's merchant. He gets 2 hides, and he also gets 1 clay, and he decides to get another brick. Now the yellow player goes to the cattle trader, and now he gets 2 grain and also receives first 1 sheep, and he decides that he wants to get another horse, so he puts it over there. Now the red player first wants to go to Bremen, and there he wants to sell 1 of his clothes, of each cloth, for a total of 12 food. And then he uses the carpenter action and wants to build a stall for 2 clay and 1 grain. He pays the grain, but he doesn't have to clay, but you can use bricks as clay, so he just pays it like this. It's not very efficient, but it still works. And now he gets the stall and puts it down there, and he immediately moves the sheep inside. The yellow player uses the chance and goes to the linen weaver, and he can convert 4 flax into linen, which he does. So he now receives 4 linen cloth The red player decides that he wants to do the dike warden again, so he moves one dike. Of course not this one, this would be illegal, but he moves this dike, and he can flip or rather upgrade another tile, and he decides he wants to upgrade his peat boat into a plow, which is worth more points, and he wants to go to Lair and sell one cow for 5 food. So he sells one cow and receives 5 food. Now we come into the last May inventory, and first all carriages are emptied, and well, the red and the yellow player only traveled this time, so the traveling will be put on the left side of their fields. For the yellow player, it's their first travel action that he made. Now the animals breed, and the red player receives another cow and another sheep, and the yellow player decides that he wants first to move the sheep out of the stall and change the sheep with the cows. So now he receives another cow and he receives another horse. Now everybody has to pay 3 food, which they do. And I of course forgot, usually you get some wool, and both players receive their wool. The red player gets 1 wool and the yellow player gets a total of 2 wool due to his 5 sheep. And with that the last winter is over, and we come into the last summer round, where the yellow player is the starting player. The yellow player first wants to cut peat, so he can cut 5 peat and can remove all the peat from his moor fields and removes all his moor fields from the game. The red player wants to build a building, and he decides he wants to build a joinery. It costs him 2 timber and 5 grain, and now he gets per plow that he has 1 horse. So he pays the 2 timber and he pays the 5 grain, and now he receives with his 3 plows a total of 3 horses. Now the yellow player also wants to build a building. He wants to build the weavery. Now he gets 1 winter cloth, and he should have gotten 2 weaving looms, but I forgot to give him that. He pays 10 wool and 2 bricks for that. The red player uses the dike builder action, so now he can move his last dike, and he also receives a cow or a sheep, and he decides that he wants to have a sheep. The yellow player uses the linen weaver and converts 4 flax into linen, so he receives a total of 4 linen for that. The red player decides that he wants to do the woodcutter and get 4 wood. The yellow player wants to do another forester action, so he has to pay 1 food, and now he gets another forest, which he puts like that. The red player, with his last action, wants to build another carriage, so he uses the labor action, pays 2 food, and builds the big carriage for all his wood and 2 horses of him. Now the red player wants to go to Norden, and there he trades 1 sheep into a total of 4 food, and he also wants to have the winter clothing and leather clothing, and also convert his wood to timber. The yellow player decides that he just wants to convert the linen into summer clothing and another wood into timber. With that, the special buildings are triggered once last time, and the red player receives 1 wood, and he decides to use the wood to increase his flashing beams by 1. So he increases the flashing beams and gives away the wood. The yellow player decides that he wants to plow another flex field, and with that we come into the last November inventory. The red player receives a total of 3 food for his cows and his sheep, and the yellow player receives a total of 5 food for his cows and sheep. Now everyone gets the fields, the goods from the fields, so 4 grain and 1 flax for the red player, and a total of 5 flax and 1 grain for the yellow player. The yellow player also receives a total of 3 wood, but the wood is useless to him now. Also, I forgot to empty the carriages, but it doesn't really matter at this point. Everyone, of course, gets all of their materials. Now everyone has to pay their peat and their food, so everyone pays 3 food and 2 peat. Yellow player can still convert some peat into materials, so since he has the peat boat, and now he first converts 1 peat into 1 flax, then he converts 3 peat into 3 grain, then he has still 3 left and converts 3 peat into 3 food. This gives him point in the end, that's why he does this. And with that we come to the final scoring. Now first we count all the materials that the players have left. The red player has a total of 5.5 points for materials. The yellow player has a total of 19 points for the materials. Then for everything in the barn, the red player has a total of 21 points and the yellow player has 2 points. Then for traveling, the yellow player has 3 and the red has 8 points. Then for the different tools, the red player has 4 points and the yellow player has a total of 8 points. Then for the different goods that the player still has, the red player has a total of 6 points and the yellow player has a total of 4 points. Then calculating all the different buildings on the plan, the red player ends up with 39 points for the different buildings, and the yellow player actually also ends up with 39 points for his home plan. Then the points for the animals are calculated. It works basically that way, that you get for the animal kind that you have least of 2 points per animal, then for the one that you have second least of 1 point per animal, and the one that you have most 0 points. So the red player has 3 of all kinds, so he gets a total of 6 points for the sheep, 3 points for the cows, and he ends up with a total of 9 points that way. The yellow player has the least cows, so he has 8 points for that, and he has 5 sheep or 5 horses, so he gets 13 points in total. And with that, the red player is with 92.5 points the overall winner of this game. Now at this point I want to give you some additional information about things that were not shown in the game. For example, this stall is upgradable into a depot that multiplies all the material goods that you have by 2. Then we have the stable, which holds 6 animals of the same kind, is worth 6 points. It's also upgradable in a double stable, and the double stable holds 3 animals of 2 different kinds each, and is also worth 9 points. Both of those are more worth than the stall that we have seen in the game. Then we have the forests. We have seen those, but we haven't seen that those are upgradable into parks, and each park holds 2 animals of a different kind, and the animals don't breed there, of course. Then we have 2 small vehicles. We have the cart, the hand cart, and the wagon. The hand cart fits 1 building material and is also upgradable into a wagon, which fits 2 building materials, but those building materials are not allowed to be combined. So you can't put a woolen cloth in there, only 2 separate building materials. Then we have the different green buildings. We have seen the upper 4 in the game, not all of them, but there were in the game, and usually you would choose 4 of the 7 down here randomly, and the special thing of those buildings is that you can basically convert at any point different goods into other goods. So for example, you could convert 1 grain and 1 peat into 3 food at any point. In any case, those are the only buildings that give you a benefit throughout the game and not only once like all other buildings. In any case, there is very similar with the yellow buildings. There are 5 of them, and you choose every game 2 different, and those buildings give you a one-time bonus. We haven't used them in the game, but they were there. Similar, it's with the blue buildings. Those are all inns, and we have seen some of the benefits of them, but basically you just play them and then you can only use their benefit once per game. Then there are some actions we haven't seen in the game yet. For example, there is the warden. Well, it's very similar to the dike warden. You can upgrade or flip over, or however you call it, a tile, but it's worse. And we haven't seen with the carpenter that you can upgrade to a stable. Then what we haven't seen is the peat boatman. It gives you 3 peat, and for every peat boat that you have, another peat. And that would be basically everything I have to say, so let's go to my final thoughts.
Now to my final thoughts of this game. Please take this with a grain of salt. I only played this game twice so far, so I can't really give some final thoughts about this, but I have some first thoughts in the end. As always, I will be having a pro and con list, and first let's go to the con list and start with the negative things. First of all, I'm not sure how the replayability of this game is. Well, from what I've played so far, both of these games have been very different regarding what the players have done. But if you're maybe more experienced in the game, maybe there are some strategies that you will be pursuing from the start, and the buildings that we have in the game only somewhat mitigate this issue. And with that, I come to another negative point. As a starting player, well, in both games we had the first player take the master action so he can improve his tools. I'd say the action is a little bit too strong, but maybe it will be better or different when we get more experience with the game. But so far, I think it's a very strong action. And as always with worker placement games, it's a game with very little interaction, and others, as in Agricola, for example, you can take others people actions with using the imitating action, and with that a little bit of tension goes away in the game compared to games like Agricola. And in general, it's not very tense in the sense of you have to feed your people or something like that. You just have to pay 3 food every end of winter and summer. It's not that heavy, and you're not really working towards to feeding, but you just accept that you have to feed them and have to pay 3 food. And to feed in the summer, just a little nuisance instead of. On the other hand, the positive things. Well, firstly, the game is very thematically. I mean, it makes sense thematically. Basically, everything is divided in summer and winter. In summer, you're doing more outdoor actions. In winter, you're doing more indoor actions, something like that. And the actions that you do in summer and winter make sense thematically. And maybe some minor things like with the fisher, you get a sheep. Okay, why do you get a sheep? I don't know. But it's just like that. What I also like is there are many ways to win the game. There are many paths to victory. You can do many things, and everything is open to you from the beginning, basically, because everything is viable and usable from the very start of the game. I also like that the game is a very complex but not too complicated 2-player game. I'm a big fan of 2-player games since I mostly play with 2 players, and I really needed a very complex 2-player game. And I think Arle or Fields of Arle will fit here very well. And what some of you may think, well, it's another version of Agricola or whatever. And I really have to disagree with you, because this is a very different game from Agricola or Caverna or Agricola, all creatures big and small. It plays very different. You have very different incentives to do different things. And with the instant actions, you also have some more things you can do. I own Agricola, and I will keep Agricola, and I will keep Fields of Arle most likely, because both games have different purposes. And with that, I come to my final and most important questions to me. Is the game fun? And will I keep the pre-order of the game? And I have to answer to both of these questions. Yes, I will. The game is very fun, I think, so far as I played, and I will continue playing it. And I also will keep the pre-order, since I think it's a very difficult and fun game, and I think you can spend many hours with the game. I really like it so far, and yeah, I think there's nothing more I can tell you about this. All in all, I have to say a thank you to Uwe Rosenberg at this point for providing me with the prototype so I can do this run through. And yeah, thanks for watching, have fun playing, and goodbye.